sound of cracking wood, the cold bite of Scandinavian winds, and the distant howl of wolves. In this harsh world, survival was brutal, but death sometimes came from an enemy you could not see. Something as small, as fragile, as the human tooth. Vikings, the fearsome raiders of the north, have long been immortalized for their bloodlust, their conquests, and their iron-willed warriors. But beneath the helmets and behind the battle scars lies a hidden story. A story of teeth. How did these warriors, these farmers, these seafarers, survive the grinding agony of tooth decay, cavities, and infection in a world without dentists? If you think the story ends with rotten teeth, think again. Because Vikings, surprisingly, had ways to fight the pain, to tame their teeth, and even to modify them for social reasons. Stay with me until the end, and you'll discover a secret practice that makes modern dentistry pale in comparison. The evidence begins in the cold, silent graveyards of Varnhem, Sweden, where skeletal remains lie frozen in time. Modern researchers examined over 3,000 teeth from 171 individuals. A meticulous glimpse into the mouths of men and women who lived 1,000 years ago. What they found was shocking. Nearly half of all these individuals had at least one cavity, and a significant number showed signs of abscesses and infections. The teeth tell a story of constant battle, a battle not on the battlefield, but inside the very mouths of these people. Some teeth were filed, some drilled, some simply worn down by the coarse, gritty foods that fed these northern societies. But what these archaeologists uncovered would challenge everything you think you know about Viking life. And the next revelation, about what they ate and how it punished their teeth, will make you wonder how they survived it all. Vikings consumed grains filled with abrasive particles, dried meats, honey, and even preserved fruits. Each bite was a tiny battle against their own teeth. The coarse bread, riddled with grit from stone milling, acted like sandpaper, slowly eroding enamel. Honey, sweet and sticky, fed the bacteria that burrowed into their molars. Imagine chewing for decades on food that shredded your teeth and encouraged decay. And yet, Vikings endured. They endured not just because of sheer toughness, but because they developed ingenious, if painful, ways to fight back. But how did they cope with the infections that inevitably followed? That's where the story takes a turn into something truly astonishing. Archaeologists found apical abscesses, infected roots that would have caused unbearable pain. Nearly half of Viking adults suffered cavities, and yet, despite the agony, they lived. Some skeletons showed healed drill marks in molars, evidence of attempts to relieve the pressure and pain of tooth infections. Picture it, a Viking, seated in a dark hut, grinding grains outside, enduring a drilling into a tooth without anesthesia. A crude yet effective practice, a desperate innovation born of necessity. And then there were the filed teeth. Incisors modified not for health, but for social signaling, a silent statement of identity. But the question remains, if they could drill teeth, could they prevent decay? The answer will surprise you. Vikings were not without tools, though by modern standards, they were crude, primitive, even brutal. Their arsenal consisted of toothpicks carved from bone or wood, small and precise enough to scrape away the debris that lodged between teeth after a long day of eating coarse, gritty bread. But hygiene alone could not save them from decay or infection. For the more severe cases, they wielded rudimentary drills, likely fashioned from flint or metal, small enough to reach the tooth's core. These were not instruments of comfort. They were instruments of necessity, owned by trial, error, and the painful lessons of generations. Imagine the Viking seated in a dimly lit hut, the scent of smoke in the air, as a family member, or perhaps a rudimentary healer, gripped a tiny drill and worked into a molar infected with decay. The drilling went directly into the pulp cavity. It is eerily similar to what modern dentists call a root canal, yet without anesthesia, without sterilization, without the precision tools of today. Every turn of the implement would have sent waves of excruciating pain through the jaw. Yet the Viking endured. And then there was tooth filing, a practice that straddled the line between health and ritual. Some incisors were sharpened, reshaped, or filed into deliberate patterns. This was not done for hygiene. It was a social statement, a mark of manhood, a tribal identifier, a silent language spoken through enamel and dentin. To a stranger in a hall or on a battlefield, the shape of one's teeth could communicate status, affiliation, or bravery. Yet these measures, remarkable as they were, had limits. When infections spread beyond the tooth, when abscesses erupted, and when pain became unbearable, even the boldest of Viking ingenuity could not always save a life. In those moments, a simple dental intervention could cross the line into horror, a desperate gamble with mortality. Despite the danger, these methods reveal a startling truth. Vikings were not passive victims of decay. They fought their enemies of enamel with whatever tools and knowledge they could muster, blending survival, ritual, and identity into a practice that was as much about courage as it was about health. And just when it seems we've uncovered the full extent of their methods, the story grows darker still. What happened when preventive measures failed and the teeth themselves became death traps? That is where the next chapter begins. Vikings were not entirely resigned to fate when it came to their teeth. Even in a world ruled by survival and the constant threat of violence, they demonstrated a remarkable, if rudimentary, understanding of oral hygiene. Evidence suggests they used rinses made from water or herbal infusions, powders ground from plants, and extracts thought to soothe gums or fight infection. These weren't mere superstitions. They were early attempts at what we might now call preventive care, born from observation, trial, and the painful lessons of experience. Toothpicks were ever present, often carved from bone or wood, scraping tirelessly between teeth after meals. Each meal of coarse bread, dried meat, or gritty grains left remnants lodged in the crevices, threatening decay. The simple act of removing them may have prevented more damage than we realize. A small but deliberate ritual that spoke to a deeper awareness of the body's vulnerabilities. Yet, despite these efforts, the battle was far from won. Cavities claimed countless teeth, and abscesses festered, gnawing at the living from within. Still, there was a method to the madness, a recognition that the mouth, often overlooked, could dictate pain, productivity, and survival. Even the mightiest warrior could be brought low by an untreated infection, and the Vikings knew it. Their preventive measures were humble, makeshift, but they reveal a startling truth. In a world of swords and storms, humans had learned to wage quiet, intimate wars against decay and disease. And if you think that's impressive, wait until we explore the case studies of individuals who went to unimaginable lengths to save their teeth. Their stories will blur the line between ingenuity and sheer desperation. One Viking skull revealed a molars drilled into the pulp, then carefully filed, clearly in an attempt to manage infection. Another had incisors filed into a perfect triangular shape, likely a marker of adulthood or social belonging. These weren't random acts, they were deliberate interventions. And each tells a story of pain endured, of knowledge applied, and of a culture that valued not just survival, but presentation, identity, and resilience. But their tools and knowledge could not overcome everything. Next, we'll uncover the terrifying limitations they faced, ones that modern dentistry has thankfully long solved. Vikings had no anesthesia, no sterilization, no antibiotics. Each procedure was excruciatingly painful and carried a high risk of infection. A drilled tooth could save a life, or it could kill. Imagine the courage it took to sit through a crude pulp drilling session with nothing but a steady hand and a handful of herbs. And yet, they persisted. The limitations of their world forced innovation in the most brutal ways imaginable. But even in this darkness, Vikings left a mark on history, a mark that allows us to peek into their hidden lives. And when we compare them to contemporaneous societies, their ingenuity becomes even clearer. Across medieval Europe, dental care was largely an afterthought. Peasants and nobles alike suffered from rotting teeth, relentless cavities, and abscesses with little to no intervention. Tooth loss was an expected part of life, an inevitable sentence for anyone unlucky enough to survive into adulthood. The wealthy sometimes had access to rudimentary extractions or herbal remedies, but even these were inconsistent, painful, and often fatal. In stark contrast, the Vikings, despite their geographic isolation and harsh environment, displayed a surprising level of dental ingenuity. They drilled into molars to relieve infection, filed teeth as a social or ritualistic marker, and employed toothpicks, herbal rinses, and powders to maintain oral hygiene. These practices were not only practical, they were radical for their time, predating similar interventions in much of Europe by centuries. It was far from perfect. The procedures were painful, infection was a constant threat, and success was far from guaranteed. Yet there was something audacious in their approach. Where other cultures accepted tooth loss as fate, Vikings fought back. They transformed a daily vulnerability into an arena of resilience, identity, and innovation. Their dentistry, as crude as it may seem, leaves modern scientists and historians with startling lessons. Human ingenuity often flourishes under necessity, and even in the darkest, most unforgiving circumstances, survival can inspire creativity in ways we rarely anticipate. And just when we think we've understood the full extent of their methods, the next section will reveal what these teeth, these silent warriors, can teach us about resilience, pain, and the human spirit itself. What can we learn from Viking teeth? That human ingenuity thrives under pressure. That even in a world of death and hardship, people fought pain, sought solutions, and left behind evidence that speaks across a millennium. Their tools, their filing techniques, their relentless battle with decay remind us that the story of humanity is not just about empires and wars. It's about survival in its smallest, most intimate forms. Before we conclude, if you're fascinated by this hidden world, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. You'll unlock more untold histories that reveal the hidden side of human ingenuity. Vikings are remembered for raiding, for conquest, for legends of blood and fire. But within their mouths, in the quiet agony of tooth decay and the courage of crude dental interventions, lies a story of survival, intelligence, and perseverance. Next time you bite into your meal or sit in a dentist's chair, remember the Viking who faced drilling without anesthesia, who filed his teeth as a statement of identity, and who waged a silent war against pain every single day. If you want to uncover more of history's hidden, dark, and fascinating stories, subscribe, turn on the bell, and click the next video waiting on your screen. There's a world of secrets still buried in time, waiting to be revealed.